They say the outer veil is where the galaxy runs out of ideas, where the stars thin out and the dark gets deep, and the only souls you find are the ones running towards something, or away from it. Nobody comes to the edge of everything by accident. Every ship out here has a story. Every pair of eyes scanning that horizon has a reason. Some are looking for fortune, some are looking for a fresh start, and some, the ones you remember, are looking for something they lost a long time ago. His name was Phoenix Ashpaw. He was the finest navigator in the Outer Veil, which is another way of saying he was the finest navigator alive. He wore his father's coat, he carried his father's silence, and on this particular night, on the ragged underside of asteroid Ven 9, with 3 moons throwing copper light across the dark, he stood at the edge of everything and looked out at the stars like they owed him an answer.
The beep came again. Slow, steady, like a heartbeat from something very old and very far away. Phoenix had heard a lot of things out in deep space. Strange sounds, weird frequencies, signals that turned out to be nothing but space junk bouncing radio waves off a dead moon. But this was different. His ship's computer chewed on it for a long moment, spinning and searching, digging through thousands of years of recorded frequencies. Then it stopped. The screen flickered, and a single line of text appeared. Frequency origin, unknown. Age of signal, 1,200 years. Phoenix stared at that number for a long time. 1,000 years. Whatever sent the signal did it before his grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was even born. He leaned forward slowly, eyes locked on the screen, ears straight up. The signal was not random. It was not bouncing off anything. It was pointed, deliberate, and it was pointed at something specific, somewhere out in the deep dark of space. Phoenix reached out and tapped the screen. A star map opened up. A single pulsing dot appeared at the far edge of the known galaxy. He didn't know what was out there. Nobody did. But something was calling, and Phoenix never could ignore a good mystery. As the red tail cut through the dark, Phoenix pulled up every old file and dusty archive his computer had stored away. Star charts, ancient records, forgotten history. He was looking for answers, and slowly, piece by piece, the story came together. A long time ago, before any living creature can remember, a great civilization built something extraordinary. A crystal. Not just any crystal, a crystal so powerful it fed energy to the oldest star systems in the entire galaxy. It kept suns burning, it kept planets warm, it kept life alive in corners of the universe that would have gone cold and dark without it. They called it the star crystal. And then one day, without warning, it vanished. The civilization that built it was gone too. No one knows what happened. No one knows where it went. Over 1,000 years passed. Explorers searched. Governments offered rewards. Wars were even fought over the idea of it. But nobody ever found it. Most people eventually decided it was nothing but a legend, a bedtime story, something you told kids to make the universe feel more magical. Phoenix leaned back and stared at the ceiling of his ship. He thought about that ancient beep coming out of his old broken speaker. He thought about that pulsing dot at the edge of the galaxy. Then he smiled, because Phoenix had always believed in the legend, and now he was starting to think the legend was real. The trading post at Sector 7 was loud, crowded, and smelled like something was always on fire. Ships of every shape and size squeezed into the docking bays. Creatures from dozens of planets pushed past each other in the narrow corridors, buying, selling, and arguing about both. It was exactly the kind of place Phoenix needed. He wanted fuel, he wanted information, and he wanted to know if anyone else had heard that signal. The fuel was easy, the information was harder, every creature he asked about the star crystal either laughed at him or walked away. Nobody wanted to talk about it. But then an old alien merchant grabbed his arm from across a cluttered market stall. Her 4 eyes were wide. Her voice was barely a whisper. She told him the signal had been heard before, by others, and every single one of them that went looking never came back. Fenix paid for his fuel, tipped his goggles, and walked straight back to his ship anyway. Fenix was 2 hours out from the trading post when she showed up. No warning, no hail, just a sleek, fast ship sliding out of nowhere and matching his speed perfectly, like she had been waiting for him. The radio crackled. A voice came through, sharp, confident, not asking for anything, telling him. She said her name was Zara. She said she was a bounty hunter. And she said he needed to turn his ship around right now because wherever that signal was leading, she had already claimed it. Fenix leaned back in his chair and smiled at the ceiling. Then he picked up the radio and told her that space was big and the signal belonged to whoever found it first. She told him she found it first. He told her he doubted that. She told him he was going to regret this. He told her he regretted nothing. She cut the channel. He laughed once to himself in the quiet of his cockpit. Then he checked his scanner. Her ship was still right there, matching his speed, perfectly. Neither of them was turning around. This was going to be interesting. The debris field came out of nowhere. 1 minute open space, the next a graveyard. Thousands of broken pieces of an ancient world floating in perfect silence. Ships, buildings, statues, all of it shattered and still, drifting slowly in the dark like the universe itself was holding its breath. Whatever this civilization had been, it was gone now. Nothing left but pieces. Fenix cut his speed and navigated carefully through the wreckage. Every turn revealed something older and stranger than the last. Then his scanner beeped. Something small, something metal, something with a faint power signature. He almost ignored it. Almost. He pulled it aboard with the retrieval arm and brought it into the cargo bay. It was a robot. Small, banged up, covered in 1,000 years' worth of dents and scratches. Fenix crouched down in front of it and hit the power switch. Nothing happened. He hit it again. The little robot's chest light flickered. Then its visor screen blinked on. 2 little dots appeared. They blinked once, then a tiny curved line formed underneath them. It was smiling. Fenix looked at it for a long moment. Then he stood up and said the only thing that made sense. "Welcome aboard."
The signal cut straight through the atmosphere of a massive, rocky planet sitting alone at the edge of a dying star system. Fenix brought the red tail down to recalibrate his nav systems, and the moment he stepped outside, he knew something was wrong. The sky was the color of a bruise. The land was cracked and dry and broken. The star above the planet was still there, but just barely, burning dim and weak, like a candle that had almost run out of wax. This world was on borrowed time. Then the ground shook, heavy, slow, something enormous moving through the dead tree line. Fenix stood his ground, Blink pressed against his leg, and then Oruk stepped out of the shadows, 8 feet tall, built like a mountain, skin like dark, cracked stone with amber light glowing from somewhere deep inside him. He looked at Fenix like he had been expecting him for a very long time. He told Fenix his people were dying, that without the energy of the ancient star systems, every planet in his corner of the galaxy was going dark, one by one. The star crystal was the only thing that could save them. He had been waiting for someone to follow that signal, someone brave enough or crazy enough to actually go looking. He asked to come along. Fenix said yes without hesitating. Across the clearing, Zara stood with her arms crossed, watching the whole thing. She rolled her eyes so hard it probably hurt, but she didn't leave.
Back on the Red Tail, things got crowded fast. Auric had to duck through every doorway and his head brushed the ceiling the whole time. Blink kept rolling into everybody's feet. Zara sat in the corner with her arms crossed and made it very clear she was not happy about any of this. But she was there, and that was something. Phoenix tried to keep things moving. He pulled up the star maps, he laid out what he knew. The signal, the legend, the destination at the edge of the galaxy. Auric listened without a word. Zara listened while pretending not to. Blink tried to follow along and knocked 3 things off the dashboard. Then Zara said what everyone was already thinking. She said this was either the most important mission in the history of the galaxy or the fastest way to get everybody killed. Possibly both. Nobody disagreed. The tension in that little ship was thick enough to cut with a blade. 4 completely different beings who didn't know each other, didn't fully trust each other, and were about to fly straight into the unknown together. Then Blink accidentally triggered his memory chip. The chest hatch popped open, the old blue chip glowed, and on the main screen a star map appeared that nobody had ever seen before. Not from any database, not from any known archive. Ancient, detailed, and pointing somewhere very specific. The whole ship went quiet. Even Zara uncrossed her arms. The ancient map led them to a place that wasn't on any chart. A small moon wrapped in permanent mist, orbiting a dim and forgotten star at the very edge of explored space. No docking stations, no settlements, no signs that anyone had been here in a very long time. Phoenix brought the red tail down through the mist onto a surface covered in soft silver moss and ancient stone ruins that glowed faintly in the fog. It was beautiful and strange and very, very quiet. They hadn't taken 10 steps from the ship when she appeared. Not from behind anything, not from the ruins, just there. One moment nothing, the next, a tall, graceful figure standing in the mist like she had grown out of it. Lyra. She looked at each of them slowly, then her eyes settled on Phoenix and stayed there. She said she had been waiting. She said she had been the keeper of the knowledge of the crystal's location for longer than any of them had been alive, and she said she would guide them the rest of the way. Phoenix asked how she knew they were coming. She smiled like that was a very simple question with a very long answer, and turned and walked into the mist. Zara leaned toward Phoenix and said she did not trust her. Phoenix said he wasn't sure he did either. Then he followed her anyway, because the map and the woman were pointing at the same place, and that was good enough for now. Far across the galaxy, on the bridge of a warship so large it blocked out the stars behind it, someone else had been watching. Commander Vex knew about the signal before Phoenix did. He had known about it for years. He had simply been waiting for someone foolish enough or brave enough to actually follow it, someone to do the hard work of finding the crystal for him. And now here was this fox, this nobody from nowhere with his beaten-up little ship and his mismatched little crew, picking his way right toward the most powerful object in the known galaxy. Vex watched the feed from his spy drones on a screen that stretched the full width of his bridge. He watched Phoenix land on the dying planet. He watched him pick up the robot. He watched him meet the giant. He watched him follow the mystic into the ruins. He noted all of it. He filed all of it away. He was not the kind of man who rushed. Rushing was for people who weren't sure they were going to win. Vex was very sure. He turned from the screen and looked out at the stars through the massive viewport of his warship. Somewhere out there, the star crystal was waiting, and this fox was going to lead him right to it. He almost felt grateful. Almost. Zara had a rule. The rule was simple. Don't get attached. It was the first thing she learned in this business, and the reason she was still alive. You take the job, you get paid, you walk away. Feelings were a luxury she had never been able to afford, and she had been doing just fine with that rule. Right up until now. Vex's message came through on her private channel in the middle of the night while the rest of the ship slept. The offer was enormous, more money than she had ever seen in one place. All she had to do was feed him their coordinates and slow Phoenix down. Just business. That was what she told herself. Just business. She sat in the dark of her ship for a long time, staring at that number on her screen. She thought about Oryx's planet going dark. She thought about Blink waking up and smiling at nobody in particular. She thought about Phoenix saying welcome aboard to a broken little robot he had just met, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She almost closed the channel. She had her finger on the button. She was right there. And then she looked at that number again. And something in her that had been hungry for a very long time made a decision before the rest of her could stop it. Her fingers moved across the console. The coordinates transferred. The channel closed. The money arrived. Zara sat in the silence of what she had just done. It didn't feel like just business. It felt like exactly what it was. The ambush came at the worst possible moment. They always do. 1 second open space and a clear path forward. The next second, Vex's warships were everywhere, dropping out of hyperspace from every direction at once like they had been waiting in the dark all along. Because they had. Phoenix hit the throttle the moment the first ship appeared. Too late. They were already surrounded. The red tail shook as tractor beams locked on from 3 directions simultaneously. Phoenix fought the controls with everything he had. Blink scrambled across the cockpit trying to reroute power. Oryx braced himself in the doorway, his staff glowing amber, his eyes calm in the way that only someone who has faced the worst before can be calm. Then the boarding craft hit the hull, and everything happened very fast. They came for Oryx specifically. 6 of Vex's soldiers in full black armor, moving through the ship like they knew exactly where he was and exactly what they were doing. Oryx fought them, of course he did. He threw 3 of them across the cabin like they weighed nothing, but there were too many, and they had weapons designed for something exactly his size. Phoenix tried to reach him. Blink threw himself at one of the soldiers and bounced off harmlessly. It didn't matter. They had him. They dragged Oryx through the breach and sealed it behind them. His eyes found Phoenix's through the viewport as they took him away. He did not look afraid. He looked like he was trusting Phoenix with something. The boarding craft detached. Vex's warships jumped back into hyperspace, and just like that, the ambush was over. The whole thing had taken less than 4 minutes. The red tail drifted in the sudden silence. Phoenix stood in the middle of his ship and looked at the empty space where Oryx had been standing. Blink stood beside him. Neither of them moved for a long time. Phoenix had been alone before. He had built his whole life around being alone. It was easier that way, cleaner. No one to worry about, no one to let down, no one to lose. He had been very good at alone, right up until he wasn't. The ancient map led him to the space temple anyway, because that was who Phoenix was. You take what life throws at you and you keep moving. The temple was extraordinary, ancient beyond imagining, a structure so old it had been drifting in orbit around a dying star since before most civilizations had learned to count. Inside, it was silent and vast and filled with the kind of darkness that felt like it had weight. And then, at the end of the longest corridor Phoenix had ever walked, in a chamber that glowed with 10,000 years of stored light, he found it, the star crystal, real, exactly as the legend described, more beautiful than anything he had ever seen in all his years among the stars. He reached for it, and a voice behind him said, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." He knew before he turned around. He knew from the cold of the voice, from the way the light in the chamber seemed to dim just slightly at the sound of it. Vex stepped out of the shadow like he had been part of it all along. He hadn't followed Phoenix here. He had simply been here, waiting, because that was what Vex did. He let other people do the hard work, and then he took what they found. He took the crystal. His soldiers sealed every exit, and the temple began to collapse. Phoenix was alone in the dark, with the walls coming down around him, and the crystal gone, and Oruk captured, and Zara's betrayal sitting in his chest like a stone, and Blink safely back on the ship because the one good decision Phoenix had made today was leaving him there. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ancient ceiling in slow curtains, and Phoenix stood in the middle of all of it. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do next. He had no plan, he had no team, he had nothing. Just him and the dark and the sound of a 1,000-year-old temple deciding it was finally done holding itself together. Zara had the money. She had the coordinates delivered. She had done exactly what she agreed to do. So why couldn't she sleep? She pulled up the scanner feed and watched the temple on her screen. Watched it shaking, watched the cracks spreading across its surface from the outside, watched Vex's warship sitting there, waiting like it had already won. And then she pulled up something she hadn't looked at since she took the deal. Oryx's planet on the long-range scanner. Still dark, still dying, still waiting on something that was now in the hands of the one person in the galaxy guaranteed to never give it back. She sat with that for a long time. Then she looked at the money in her account. Then she looked at the temple on the scanner. Then she did something she almost never did. She made a decision with her heart instead of her head. She transferred the money back, every single credit. She grabbed the controls and she flew straight toward the one thing she had spent her whole career knowing better to do. She flew toward the fight but wasn't hers, because somewhere along the way, it had become hers, and she was done pretending otherwise. The temple was coming down fast. Phoenix had maybe 3 minutes before the whole thing went. He had tried every exit, every corridor, every door. All of them sealed, all of them solid. He was running out of walls to try, and running out of time to try them. And then, from somewhere in his jacket pocket, came a sound he recognized, his comm unit. Blink! The little robot's voice crackled through the speaker, thin and urgent and completely unlike the cheerful beeping Phoenix was used to hearing from him. He was saying something. Phoenix pressed the comm to his ear in the dark of the collapsing chamber and listened, and what he heard stopped him cold. Blink remembered. Not just fragments, not just glimpses, everything. His complete memory had come back all at once the moment the crystal left its dais, because Blink had not always been a drifting piece of forgotten wreckage in an ancient debris field. Blink had been built by the same civilization that built this temple. He knew every corridor, every passage, every hidden path, and every structure they had ever made, including the one that ran directly beneath Phoenix's feet right now. Phoenix looked down at the floor of the collapsing chamber. He looked at the ancient carved stone beneath his boots. Then he dropped to his knees and started feeling along the carvings with his fingers. Third panel from the left. That was what Blink said. Third panel from the left. His fingers found it. A section of carving slightly different from the rest, slightly warmer to the touch, slightly alive in a way the rest of the dying temple was not. He pressed it. The floor opened, and Phoenix fell through into the dark below just as the ceiling of the crystal chamber came down completely above him. Zara got to the red tail before Phoenix did. She sat outside it in her ship and she waited. She didn't know if he would come back from that temple. She didn't know if the tunnel Blink had walked him through would hold. She just sat in the dark and waited, and did not let herself think about what it would mean if the boarding ramp never came down. When it did come down and Phoenix walked out, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Then she saw his face. He looked at her ship sitting there, and he stopped. And the look he gave her was not angry. Angry would have been easier. It was something quieter and colder than angry. It was disappointed. He walked past her ship without stopping and went inside the red tail, and the boarding ramp went back up behind him. She sat in her cockpit in the silence of that for a long time. Then she looked at the long-range scanner. Oryx's signal was still there on Vex's warship, still alive, still a prisoner, still waiting. And nobody was going after him. She thought about Fenix's face, that quiet, cold, disappointed face. And she thought about Oryx's planet going dark. And she thought about what kind of person she wanted to be when this was all over. She powered up her engines. She went into Vex's warship alone. No backup, no deal, no guarantee that anyone would be waiting when she came out. Just her and the choice she had made and the cost she was willing to pay for it. When she came back down that boarding ramp with Oryx behind her, Fenix was standing at the bottom of it. He had lowered it himself. He had been watching her the whole time on the scanner. He looked up at her, and she looked down at him, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Then he stepped aside and let her in. And that was enough. That was everything. Oryx hit the hull first. The whole warship shook. Every alarm on every deck fired at once, and Vex's soldiers scrambled toward the breach. And that was exactly the point. While every eye in the warship turned toward the giant tearing through the portside hull, Zara was already through the fighter bay on the starboard side before a single pursuit ship could launch. And while the warship was looking left and looking right and trying to figure out what was happening, Fenix came straight up the middle, just him and the red tail and that little blue engine leak burning bright as a comet in the dark. Nobody stopped him. Nobody even saw him coming. Because that is the thing about a good team. The other side can only look in so many directions at once. Oryx fought through corridor after corridor, drawing soldiers like a magnet, his amber cracks blazing brighter with every impact, unstoppable and completely deliberate about it. Zara moved through the fighter bay like she had designed the place herself, systematically and permanently grounding every pursuit ship in the bay with the calm efficiency of someone who has been the most dangerous person in every room they have ever entered. And Fenix ran, down corridors he had never seen, following the signal from Blink in his ear the whole way, that little ancient voice guiding him left and right and left again through the belly of the warship, straight toward Vex, straight toward the crystal, straight toward the moment this whole journey had been building to since a 1,000-year-old signal beeped through a broken speaker on a drifting ship in the quiet of deep space. He didn't slow down. He didn't look back. He had his team behind him and the crystal ahead of him, and for the first time since this all began, Fenix felt something he hadn't expected to feel in the middle of the most dangerous moment of his life. He felt ready. Vex moved first. 1 second perfectly still, the next crossing the chamber in a single stride. Fenix was already gone, rolling under the strike and coming up on the other side of the crystal housing. Vex didn't chase. He circled, slow and deliberate, cutting off every angle, his silver eyes removing escape routes one by one. Fenix circled the other way, reading him, reading the room. The second strike came without warning, and Fenix took it on the shoulder and went down hard on one knee. Vex raised his hand for the final blow, and Fenix threw himself forward, rolling under Vex's reach and coming up behind him, driving him into the wall. Vex spun instantly and lifted Fenix completely off the floor, face to face, the crystal blazing behind them both. Vex looked at him like it was already over. Then his eyes went to the housing controls behind Fenix's shoulder. The countdown Fenix had set when he first walked through the door, the one Blink told him about. It hit 0. The crystal fired straight into Fenix's open hand like it had always known where it belonged. Vex let go, and for the first and only time in his life, he had nothing. Fenix hit the floor, crystal in hand, looked up at him, and said the only thing worth saying, "It's over." Fenix carried the crystal back through the heart of the warship alone, past the corridors where Auric had fought, past the fighter bay where Zara had done her work. Every soldier they passed stood down, not because anyone ordered them to, because the crystal was no longer Vex's, and somewhere in the biology of every living thing in that ship, something ancient recognized that fact and went quiet. Back on the Red Tail, the four of them pointed toward the oldest star system in the galaxy, the place the ancient map had marked from the beginning, the place the crystal had been calling home for 1,000 years. When they got there, Fenix held the crystal up to the light of the dying star system, and the crystal answered. It knew where it was. It knew what it was supposed to do. He placed it in the ancient dais that had been waiting for it in the heart of the oldest station in the galaxy, a structure so old it made the space temple look new. And the crystal locked in with a sound like the universe exhaling. And then the light came back. Not all at once, slowly, the way dawn comes. Star by star, the ancient systems began to glow again. Planets that had been cold and dark for 1,000 years felt warmth for the first time in living memory. And somewhere across the galaxy, on a rocky planet with a cracked and dying surface, a pale amber light began to fall from above, and the ground began to warm. They didn't stay long. That was never the plan. Auric left first. He walked back down the boarding ramp onto his own planet's soil and knelt and pressed both enormous hands flat against the warming ground. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Lyra appeared from nowhere the way she always did, smiled at Fenix like she had seen all of this coming from the very beginning, and disappeared back into whatever mystery she lived in. Zara shook Fenix's hand once, firm and brief and real. Then she walked to her ship without looking back. That was Zara. Blink watched her go from Fenix's shoulder. His visor screen showed something small and quiet and a little bit sad. Fenix scratched the top of his head once, gently. Then they watched the ships go, one by one, out into the stars, until it was just the two of them again, the fox and the little robot, right back where they started, except nothing was the same at all. The Red Tail lifted off from Auric's planet one last time and pointed herself at the stars. No destination, no schedule, nobody waiting. Just the way Fenix liked it. Except it wasn't just the way he liked it anymore. Blink was in the co-pilot seat, feet not quite reaching the floor, antenna spinning, visor screen showing the particular expression of a small, ancient robot who cannot believe his luck. Fenix leaned back in his chair, boots up on the dashboard, same as the first day, except the ship felt different now. Fuller. The kind of full that has nothing to do with how many people are in the room. He looked over at Blink. Blink looked back at him, and then the beacon beeped. That same ancient frequency, a new signal, unknown origin, pointing somewhere nobody had ever been. Fenix looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Blink. Blink's antenna went to maximum speed. His visor screen showed one thing, a smile so wide it barely fit the screen. Fenix laughed, one real laugh in the quiet of the cockpit. Then he reached forward, punched in the heading, and the Red Tail leaped into the dark like she had been waiting her whole life for whatever came next. Because she had. They both had.